In Revelation chapter 1, verse 1, it says, "The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him to show unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass. And he sent and signified it by his angel unto his servant John." The phrase "shortly come to pass," literally in the Hebrew or Greek language, means when a certain time has arrived, then this book will begin to happen in rapid succession. Then when we drop down to verse 10, it says, "I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day." The word "on" is a mistranslation. You could actually choose one of any four prepositions: in, on, at, or by. But since this is the theme for the whole book of Revelation, it has to do with projecting forward into a time period. And the only one of those four prepositions, in, on, at, or by, that literally has to do with time is "in." So it should have said, "I was in the Spirit in the Lord's day." So John was projected forward to the very close of the age so that you and I come on the scene in the close of the age, and we're living in the very book of Revelation. In Revelation 13, verse 1, John said that he saw a beast rise up out of the sea. And when you turn to Revelation 17, verse 15, you'll see that it's the sea of humanity. So there is a government going to rise out of all of humanity. It's going to be a world government at the close of the age. The question becomes, how do we know this is happening in our lifetime? And then another question is, does America have a chance to survive? Or will it also be merged into this all-powerful one-world government? With the loss of the Americans' Constitution, their Bill of Rights, the sovereignty as a nation, and just be one other nation among all the other nations of the world that are a part of this world government. Those who began planning this particular world government began way back May 1st, 1776. After 5 years of being in secret, laying down the blueprint, and those who were involved worshiped Lucifer. When he rebelled against God, his name was changed to the opposer, which means Satan. And so really they worshiped Satan, even though those in the higher echelon like to call him Lucifer. They pounded out the program for world government. There were 7 basic aims in order to achieve that. Number 1, they had to abolish all ordered governments. That's why we've seen revolutionary wars in governments all over Africa, Asia, Central and South America, including Cuba, 90 miles off the shore of Florida. They also wanted to abolish private property, which they've done through the name of international communism. Everything belongs to the state. Communism is nothing more than a front organization for the Illuminati. Then they said they wanted to abolish all inheritance. This way, everybody would be equal all over the world, and that is the new communist man they're trying to achieve. The goal is that everybody is equal. Male, female, wealth, non-wealthy, they all are merged into one class of citizens, servants to those who run the world. Then they wanted to abolish patriotism. So they began to, through the United Nations organization, they began an organization called the United Nations Cultural Organization, CITO it was called. And they began to go around the world. And the first place they went in the United States was none other than St. Charles, Missouri, a college right there. And they began to pass out packets of how teachers could change the minds of children to make them international citizens, not American citizens. Then they said they wanted to abolish all religion. Why is it that those who are the front organizations for this particular world government drive today, when they take over a country, they try to abolish and they persecute and kill religious leaders and imprison those who will not renounce their religion because of this program? Then they wanted to abolish the family unit as we know it, marriage. They wanted all morality based upon the Bible and Western Christianity destroyed. They wanted the proper education of children to be undermined so that they would be easily influenced toward world government and entering into this government. Then the seventh and final objective was they wanted to create a Novus Ordo Seclorum right on the back of your $1 bill underneath the pyramid. And it means the new secular world order. A world order without God, without Jesus Christ. What is happening in the world today is a spiritual battle, and it's waged behind the scenes. We only see the physical effects of the battle that is waged behind the scenes. Because these spirit beings are literally giving power to these men. How could something that started May 1st, 1776 continue unabated in continuity from one generation to the next, to the next, to the next, right on down to our day, and become even more powerful than ever before unless there was something behind the scenes to give it guidance? It couldn't. Most members of this Illuminati never are allowed to know the real goals of this Illuminati. They have been assured that the sole purpose of it was to create happiness for the human race. But when we look around the world and see the happiness that is found in the countries that have been overthrown by these people, it's absent. There is nothing but poverty, fear, and that's why they're kept under control. Adam Weishaupt had a very subtle but clear-cut plan to destroy religion. He said that he would invite Christians of every sort and communion into their group. By this time, they had already infiltrated very high Freemasonry. This was done in 1782. And so once they left that meeting, they began to infiltrate into all the churches in Europe. And then, of course, when they came onto the shores of America, they began to do the same thing. They said they had to infiltrate in secret, not revealing that they were there to undermine the precepts of the Bible. Therefore, the people would happily go along because the minister smiled. He put on a front of being happy. He seemed to be joyful, and therefore they would infiltrate and destroy. From the time of Adam Weishaupt, May 1st, 1776, and the time that they were raided by the Bavarian government and they went underground, the only way that you and I can trace their movements is to find groups and organizations working for the identical same goals: to destroy national sovereignty of nations, the establishment of a one-world government, or, as they said, a Novus Ordo Seclorum. In 1829, in the United States of America, an American Illuminist sponsored a series of lectures in New York. Frances Wright advocated everything that Adam Weishaupt laid down. She called together all the Illuminati members to a meeting in New York. She said they were going to begin the program in the New World. It included communism, even though that name did not come to the fore until 1919 to 1921 with V.I. Lenin. But it would be made very acceptable by the population when they would use such phrases as equal opportunity and equal rights. Now you think about that for a minute. How much has your mind and my mind been influenced by those 5 little words? Equal opportunity and equal rights. This sponsored and created the feminist movement seeking equal rights, and if certainly God made every man and every woman in his image, so they should treat one another fairly. But they have abused and misused these terms for their own ungodly gain. Then they said they would start promoting the term atheism. Have we seen that, especially since 1917 to 1919 with the overthrow of Russia? Atheism in every single country that they have taken over. They've destroyed the religion of the country. And then they said there would be an emancipation of women so that they could be just as degenerate as men. They could engage in free love, and that violates everything that the Christian Bible stands for. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not commit fornication, premarital sexual relationships, homosexuality, everything that has to do with sexual activity. They wanted women to be free, to be just as degenerate as men, to have affairs with the opposite sex and not their own husband. Have we seen this as a destructive force in our society today? Or am I just making this up? Do we see it on television all the time? Can you go to a movie theater without seeing this type of activity? You never see a G-rated movie become a blockbuster at the box office. Very rarely would that ever happen. They said that they had to go and subvert the government of the United States in secret. This was all in New York City in 1829. And then they appointed those who would head up the drive to raise money, funds, and membership in the New World. Very prominent names like Horace Greeley and others. Along came a man at a later time by the name of Albert Pike from Little Rock, Arkansas. He was a Satanist. He didn't beat around the bush about it. He didn't try to hide it. And so he laid down the plans because he became the head of all Freemasonry in the world. And so July 14th, 1889, he sent a letter to the 23 Supreme Councils of the world. Now this is very important for us to understand because this will prove that there is a spiritual battle being waged in the world today. He stated within this letter, and I'll paraphrase most of it, that they should be able to say to the masses, because they were Freemasons, they would be able to say to the masses, or to those of the 32nd and 31st and 30th degree, all the way down to the first degree, that they believed in a God But he said, those of us of the high degrees, that's the honorary 33rd degree, which they hand select out of the 32nd degree. They said that they must maintain the purity of the Luciferian doctrine. Lucifer, who became known as Satan. He even said in that letter, yes, Lucifer is God. Is there a spiritual battle going on in the world today? The Western world of Christianity doesn't even know there is a spiritual battle for survival. He went on to say, the doctrine of Satanism is a heresy. He said the true and pure philosophic religion is the belief in Lucifer, the God of light. Now this is Albert Pike, who's buried 13 blocks from the Capitol in Washington, D.C., revered in Freemasonry as one of the all-time greats. His book, Morals and Dogma, within the first few pages tells that there was going to be a revolution. And the revolution had to have guidance by someone. And the guidance would, unfortunately for you and me, be Lucifer, better known as Satan in the Bible. There was a remarkable letter that was written on August 15th, 1871. This letter was on display in the British Museum Library in London, England until 1977. Giuseppe Mazzini of Italy, who headed up the revolutionary part of the Illuminati, wrote to Albert Pike, and they agreed on how to achieve world government. Their plans call for 3 world wars. They also call for many revolutionary wars. This would be after the term communism came out out from under the surface. Everybody in the world would know the name communism, the enemy of everyone else in the world. He said in that letter, we, meaning the Illuminati, the worshipers of Lucifer, shall unleash the nihilists and atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, something that is going to be unparalleled in human history. It's going to be so awful. It's going to kill and maim millions upon millions of people. And he said, in which the horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism. Why would he want to show the effect of atheism? Because they worship Lucifer. They believe Lucifer is God. They want the rest of the world to worship Lucifer as if he were God. They're preparing the minds of men to do exactly what it says in 1 Thessalonians. There will be a man sitting in the temple of God claiming to be God. He will exalt himself above all that is called God. And so they're preparing the world for that by disillusioning everyone else. They went on to say, these destroyers of civilization and the multitudes, disillusioned with Christianity, because they will think, how could a God of love allow such things to happen? It's a legitimate question if you don't understand the plan and the purpose of God, that God is the God of the living and not the dead, and that he is the God of the resurrection from the dead, and that he sent his Son not to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. But he's allowed Satan and his angels to remain here, so really God is in charge. And since he's allowed these things, he will set his hand at the right moment in history to reverse the circumstance. But for those who don't understand that and do not know the plan of God, they will become disillusioned with Christianity. They'll pitch in the towel. And then they will not know what to worship anymore. So, according to Albert Pike and Giuseppe Mazzini, those in Christianity that are so disillusioned will be pointed to Lucifer. But Christianity will be destroyed. But who could, in secret, begin to destroy our nation's morality? That was part of the goals of the Illuminati. Can you witness it and can you see it? Have you heard about any of the organizations that are doing this right now? Have you and I seen the effects of what they're doing in our country? The American Civil Liberties Union's timing was just right in 1962. They took to the United States Supreme Court the idea that you should not be able to have religion in schools. It just so happened in 1962, 9 out of the 12 judges were either Freemasons or members of the Skull and Bones Society. And so they voted prayer and Bible study out of the schools, saying they were unconstitutional. Now, this outraged Americans, but give things time, and they forget. And so the law in America is now that you cannot, under any circumstances, pray, carry a Bible, display a Bible in the public schools. There was an FBI assistant named W. Cleon Skousen who wrote a book, The Naked Communist. He revealed that one of the communist goals was to use technical decisions in the courts to weaken basic American institutions which were based upon Christianity, saying that it violated civil rights of other people. So Christianity violates the rights of other people. If you believe in God and say His name in a public school, if you read the Bible in a public school, you're violating the civil rights of someone that may not go to church. Yes, they would also break down cultural standards of Christianity. We know it as morality. He said they would do this by promoting pornography in books, magazines, motion pictures, on the internet, television, and they would present homosexuality and a degenerate lifestyle and promiscuity, wife swapping, husband swapping as normal, natural, and healthy. And if you weren't a part of it, you were the one that was insane. You needed to be carted off to the funny farm. This is what they've been doing ever since 1962. Can you tell it? Have you seen TV lately? Have you gone to a motion picture? For us, if we bleeped out everything that we saw in an hour or maybe a 2-hour, 15-minute movie, we'd get to see 3 minutes. Not every movie, but many of them. They said that they would infiltrate churches. And one time there was a survey made. 7,000 ministers in America admitted to being pink ministers. Socialist, undermining the virgin birth of Jesus Christ, undermining the divinity of Jesus Christ, that He was very God and came into human form and died for the sins of the world, and the death of one God is worth more than all other human beings combined. They denied it all. So what do we see in America today? People going to church to find somebody to husband and wife swap with. It doesn't matter. There's no morality. Once saved, always saved. Live like you want to. That's what they preach. When my Bible says to the 7 churches in Revelation 2 and 3, to him that overcomes, then there will be rewards in the kingdom of God for them, not those that fail to overcome, that live this degenerate lifestyle. They also said that they wanted to discredit the Bible as the Word of God. They wanted to emphasize the need for intellectual maturity. You don't need a crutch, a religion to lean upon. Have we seen that today? Sure we have. Have we seen the elimination of prayer or any phase of religious expression in the school systems for our young people? And then when they go home at night, since the parents also have been secularized, they don't take the time to teach their children to offset their misteaching during the day. And so we see a society that is crumbling before our eyes, and it's a historical fact that every nation that has gone into debauchery, like America, has always crumbled and fallen. Today, the ACLU points out with pride a long list of Supreme Court rulings that have not just banished religion from the public forum in America, but they have literally promoted abortion, homosexuality, the free expression of pornographers. Cleon Skousen also reported the communists wanted to eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship. Have we seen it? We've probably heard it. They said that it's a violation of free speech and free press. Our forefathers never intended for freedom of speech and freedom of press to be used for degenerate purposes. But the American Civil Liberties Union has done exactly that. At one time, they had a staff of 60 attorneys, 2,000 volunteers, 300,000 members. All this has doubled in the last 15 years. They've become the number one representative of the law field before the Supreme Court outside of the United States government itself. No wonder our nation is falling and crumbling. For the American Civil Liberties Union, the establishment of a free society is predicated upon the idea that religion must be removed completely, totally. What was one of the 7 points of taking over the world? Eliminate religion. They must eliminate it. Do we have an organization? Its number one design and goal is to destroy the underpinnings that made America great, that it was declared a Christian nation February 29th, 1892 in a 9-0 decision of the Supreme Court. And in 70 years, they have abolished the very Christianity from the classrooms, the public squares, and public buildings that made this country great. So the question once again, can America survive? Will they survive? How could they survive? The American Civil Liberties Union took an obscure phrase out of a letter. It had nothing to do with a law. had nothing to do with the United States government, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, any statute, but a letter that one person wrote to another and said it seems that they're building a wall of separation between the church and the state. And they have used that in the court to uphold. And now you hear by all newscasters, even Lou Dobbs, who seems to be very conservative and for America, use the phrase separation of church and state. This is how they're getting around it all. By building a wall to keep religion out of government. If they can keep religion out of government, they can infiltrate with non-religious people. High 33rd degree hand-selected individuals. Members of the Skull and Bones Society working for world government, the Thule Society of Germany, the Bohemian Grove, the Bilderbergers, the Committee of 300, and on their organizations to confuse us, frustrate us, so that when we think we know who is behind it, suddenly there's someone else, and someone else. It's layer upon layer of deception. But that's Satan's way. And he's using the American Civil Liberties Union at this time to get rid of Christianity out of America. Roger Baldwin, who founded in part the modern-day American Civil Liberties Union, was a socialist. He was also a nudist. He was a self-avowed communist fellow traveler. The American Civil Liberties Union had a co-founder who was a member of the Order of Skull and Bones, which our current president is a member, and his father and grandfather before him. And also the person who opposed our current president was also a member of the Skull and Bones. Baldwin wrote books in defense of the Soviet tyranny. He also wrote books, and within the pages of it, he defended the terror that they used against the people to keep them in line. In the book Liberty Under the Soviets, Baldwin wrote, quote, "Repressions in Western democracies are violations of professed constitutional liberties, and I condemn them as such. Repressions in Soviet Russia are weapons of struggle in the transition period to socialism." So he justifies it. It's terrible in America, but it's great for the Russians because they can terrorize people. They can keep them in control. Anyone who will not be terrorized, anyone who will not be controlled, they will just take them, at least they used to, in boxcars to Siberia and work them with bread and water till they fell dead. This is the way they do in all the communist countries for those who oppose what they're doing. There was an organization to begin with called the American League to Limit Armaments. This was during World War I, because they said they had to have 3 world wars, and they would use those to try to create a world government. This organization was founded December 18th, 1914. It was an offshoot of another organization called the Emergency Peace Federation. It was headed by a communist by the name of Louis Lochner. Now, Lochner also had an associate called Jane Addams, a longtime socialist, later exposed as a secret member of the Communist Party. Why would I mention these people? To show what the American Civil Liberties Union that's destroying Christianity is. A communist front organization, founded by communists, founded by those members of Skull and Bones. They're all in bed together, working for the same thing, a new world order. Why is it that President Bush started saying it back in 1990 and 1991 210 times? Before him, the only political or politician in the 20th century that used that phrase was Adolf Hitler. Then Mikhail Gorbachev came to America, and he used it. It was on the front pages of newspapers. Gorbachev seeks new world order. We even put it on our television programs to prove that we know what we're talking about.
Мир развернулся в своем движении в другом направлении, к новому мировому порядку.
I think
Новой
even that does not describe why the world has changed so much and why the world has turned so much toward a new world order and a new kind of civilization.
So all these communists founded these organizations. They were paid agents of the Soviet government. In 1915, the League changed its name to the American Union Against Militarism so that they could oppose the draft. Then they changed it again when Roger Baldwin came on the scene to the National Civil Liberties Bureau. And then in 1919 to the American Civil Liberties Union. Roger Baldwin and others such as Gurley Flynn, a known communist, William Z. Foster, who was chairman of the Communist Party USA for many, many years, were all a part of the founding of the American Civil Liberties Union. And another radical communist by the name of Scott Nearing, who also was a Socialist Party chairman, along with Norman Thomas, who ran 6 times on the Socialist Party for the presidency of the United States. Finally, he said, I'm not going to run anymore because Franklin Delano Roosevelt will pass all of my platform, but he'll be called a Democrat and they'll accept it. And they did. And so America became socialized under Franklin Delano Roosevelt, just as if it had been a communist in office. And so America has been radicalized through socialism ever since. And little by little, they've been tightening the noose. Here's what American Civil Liberties Union Roger Baldwin had to say that his objectives were. I am for socialism, disarmament. Listen closely to a phrase that I'm going to repeat a little later on when our defenses are down. And ultimately, what did he say? For abolishing the state. What would happen if this North American community takes place? America as a state would be abolished. Mexico would be abolished. Canada would be abolished. Exactly what they said as far back as 1776 is happening right now before our eyes. He went on to say, I seek the social ownership of property. In other words, take everybody's property from them. I seek the abolition of the propertied class. That's called the middle class in America and upper class. I seek the sole control of those who produce wealth. That's the manufacturers. Then he concluded his statement by saying, communism is the goal. End of his quotes. If you've ever watched CNN, Lou Dobbs, occasionally they talk about the destruction of the middle class in America. By all the manufacturers fleeing to communist China, Mexico, the Philippines, and other countries. So the middle class is the primary propertied class in America. The first 6 months of the year 2007, there were double the number of bankruptcies in the middle class than there were the entirety of the year 2006. Does that sound like the economy is perking along really good? And it is so good that it might even start causing inflation? Here's inflation. Last week, Saturday night, right after sunset, we decided to go for a drive. An hour later, we came back to fill up with gasoline to start our trip back here. The gas was $2.79 a gallon when we left. When we came back, it was $3.14 a gallon in an hour in Orlando, Florida. They want to abolish the middle class, of which America is based upon. To be exact, a woman by the name of Madame Blavatsky of Russia, she worshiped Lucifer. She had transmissions placed inside of her mind, and she passed those on to Alice Bailey of England. Alice Bailey wrote in her huge book, Externalization of the Hierarchies, that the masters of wisdom, these are demons. They're pawning themselves off as masters of wisdom. The same way they did to a man who wrote a book, Think and Grow Rich. He said he had 9 masters of wisdom that gave him all of his program, that he wrote his book based upon it. They said that the world had to be broken down into regions first before they could create a world government. That's why the common market started with 6 trading partners in Europe. Now it's composed of 25 countries giving up their national independence and national sovereignty if they accept the Constitution for the European community. They've already come out with a single currency called the euro. Great Britain is the only one, and France, that are balking at it. Britain doesn't want to give up the crown and does not want to give up the pound sterling. So they're reneging. The ACLU's goal is to achieve communism in America. That's why all of our religion is disappearing. People say they're religious. The Apostle Paul said it very clearly concerning his own native tribe of Judah. They have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge. And so people claim to be religious, but they have no idea how to reach the true God. Investigative committees at both the state and the federal level reported on the American Civil Liberties Union. It said they were radicals. It said the American Civil Liberties Union, in the last analysis, is a supporter of all subversive movements. And the propaganda is detrimental to the interest of the state. They went on to report it attempts not only to protect crime, only when they got involved were criminals given shortened terms and turned loose upon the public. It was them in the courts of the Supreme Court and local state courts. They said, but to encourage attacks upon our Constitution and institutions in every form. So that's what the American Civil Liberties Union is all about. Oh, they will put up a front once in a while, wave American flags, and talk patriotic. But nearly every single major case they have ever taken tends to weaken our basic Christian heritage. Every one of them. No exception. Even the mine workers, United Mine Workers of America, put out a report. And it said they posed as a champion of liberties of speech, press, and assembly. They said this organization, however, works in harmony and unity with a communist superstructure. Indicting, they went on in that same statement and said they conduct nationwide campaigns for the liberation of Bolsheviks or communists. They are unpatriotic and seek revolutionary activities. This is the American Civil Liberties Union. Even the Special House Committee to investigate communist activities in the United States before it was disbanded went on to say that they are affiliated with the communist movement in the United States. And they put in capital bold letters that the main function of the American Civil Liberties Union was to use force and violence to overthrow, replacing the American flag by a red flag, erecting a Soviet government in place of the Republican form of government guaranteed to each state by the federal Constitution. It's known, but you don't hear about it on the national news, do you? Someone is in control of the mass media that will not allow the truth to be told. Special House Committee on Un-American Activities also reported, not only does the American Civil Liberties Union admit to open defense of communists, but it defends every communist movement to subvert America. It receives its funds from the Communist Garland Fund. And then the state of California also got in on the act by investigating the American Civil Liberties Union. It says the American Civil Liberties Union may be definitely classified as a communist front. They have become even more militant as time has gone by. Their goal, their purpose is to weaken law and order in America. Where do you think the Miranda, the reading that the police have to say, that anything used against you can be used in court when they arrest someone? Because of the American Civil Liberties Union going to the courts. That's why so many technicalities can be used to set criminals free, to set them free on America, so that they can diminish the authority of schools, they can diminish the authority of police, and the influence of religion. And that's what that special committee from California said about the American Civil Liberties Union. Many of the American Civil Liberty Union lawyers have been members of the National Lawyers Guild. Our own government, special committees on un-American activities, investigated the Lawyers Guild. And here's what they had to say. Quote, "It's the foremost legal bulwark of the Communist Party." End of quote. So is America being undermined? The question is, can America survive? We'll see before I'm through. Mr. Roger Baldwin, he said that he was for maintaining socialism and communism by any means whatsoever, once it's established. He went on to say that the number one problem in the world today is the class struggle. Who does that sound like if you've ever studied Karl Marx? If you've ever studied V.I. Lenin, Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong? Every one of them say there's a class struggle for world dominance. It's the central conflict in the world today. Everything else is coincidental, according to Roger Baldwin, that founded the American Civil Liberties Union. The American Civil Liberties Union is a front organization to further our destruction, hiding behind, only on occasions, flags and the sound of patriotic verbiage. While Russia was being built into a weapon of destruction by the Illuminati so that it could foment those wars and revolutions that were spoken of by Albert Pike and Giuseppe Mazzini, the final groundwork was also being laid by Albert Pike. And then it was adjusted by V.I. Lenin's update. It was sort of an addendum to it. V.I. Lenin, after he died, Joseph Stalin had Dmitry Manuelitsky give a final statement as to how they would take the United States of America after their infiltration from within, the Revolutionary Wars and World War I and World War II had been completed, and they were preparing for the Third World War. Who was Dmitry Manuelitsky? He was the professor of the Lenin School of Political Warfare in Moscow. Here's what he declared, quote, "War to the hilt between communism and capitalism," and that's what we have in this country at one time, capitalism. They said that it's inevitable. Today, of course, we, meaning Russia, are not strong enough to attack. Our time will come. Now think about this a moment. What did V.I. Lenin say concerning the industrialists in America? He said that America would sell Russia the rope to hang ourselves with. He said, our time is not come yet. To win, we will need the element of surprise. The Western world will have to be put to sleep. They'll have to be told communism is dead. Yay, Ronald Reagan. You defeated communism. He went on to say, so we shall begin by launching the most spectacular peace movement on record. There shall be electrifying overtures and unheard of concessions. The 10 satellite countries were supposedly set free. They weren't. A KGB agent ruled every one of them. Still does. Then the Berlin Wall came down. East and West Germany came together once again, electrifying overtures. Then he went on to give what would be the results. He said the capitalist countries, stupid and decadent. Why are we decadent? Because they have infiltrated. They have undermined the morality of a Christian nation. I can remember growing up, God had not called me into the church, but I went into the classrooms in the school and I was taught the 10 Commandments, at least 9 of them. I went to church with my mother every time the doors were open. I was taught 9 of the 10 Commandments. There was morality in this country as far as one neighbor toward another, but we've become decadent. They said the capitalist countries will rejoice to cooperate to their own destruction. They will leap at another chance to be friends. What is happening right now? George Walker Bush, President of the United States, has already met with Vladimir Putin of Russia, invited them to become a part of the World Trade Organization, just like Richard Nixon did Communist China. Look what Communist China is doing to us, destroying our economy. He said they will leap at another chance to be friends. As soon as their guard, their military is down, we will smash them with a clenched fist. Is our military down? You bet it is. It's not in America, is it? It's in a war in Iraq, just like Vietnam. Afghanistan, we're fighting on two fronts when our generals said that we do not have the manpower nor military supplies to fight on two fronts and be effective. Are we really being effective? Why is Turkey amassing on the border of Iraq? If we're so effective, why can't we stop it? We will see how things turn out. But V.I. Lenin gave his plan, and we will see whether or not it is happening right now in our lifetime and how far it's come, so that we will know whether this new world order is just over the horizon. Who knows? A year, 2 years, 3 years? We don't know. But our God does. V.I. Lenin said, first, we will take Eastern Europe. Because of communist infiltration and the number one advisor sitting by the right hand of Franklin Delano Roosevelt held up our military and let Russia march across 10 countries in Eastern Europe. And they met in the middle of Berlin. So did they take Eastern Europe? Yes, they did. Then they said, we'll take the masses of Asia. How did they do that? First of all, they started receiving from the United States surplus war materials. The United States gave it to Russia. Russia passed it on to Mao Zedong in China. They cut off aid, our State Department, to Chiang Kai-shek so that he couldn't defend China anymore. So Mao Zedong chased him down onto a little island called Formosa at that time. The largest populated nation on earth fell, just like he said, the masses of Asia. Then they started the Korean War, North and South. Then the Vietnamese War, to destroy the morale of the American military so that we would look like paper tigers. We couldn't win a war. And so when we tucked our heads between our tail and withdrew, the world looked at us as if we were nobody. And ever since then, the world has turned against us. They thought it was inevitable. Russia was going to be the winner. They wanted to be on their side. Then V.I. Lenin said, we will encircle the United States. How do you encircle someone? You train a man living in the mountains of Central America and in Mexico. And in the right time, you send that man, Fidel Castro, and overthrow Cuba, the first communist country in the Western Hemisphere. Whatever happened to the Monroe Doctrine? It said if any outside government from any part of Europe or the rest of the world tries to come into North, Central, and South America, the United States will blow them to smithereens. We didn't lift a finger because there was infiltration in the State Department, and when they tried to invade Cuba, it was a debacle. And so they said, we will surround the United States. San Salvador fell. Communists had a foothold in Central America. Mexico has been communist ever since. They just don't use the term, but they certainly have flags of Mao Zedong, Stalin, and V.I. Lenin flying in front of their state capital, and we have pictures of it. Vicente Fox, we have pictures of him standing on the stage in communist Cuba, hugging Fidel Castro. And then every single election in South and Central America in the last 10 years from this taping has been a socialist. And now Chavez of Venezuela is threatening to turn all of their oil over to China and cut the United States off. That would drive the price of gasoline in America up to $4 or $5 a gallon. The economy runs on energy. Are they encircling America? What happened to the Panama Canal? It was given away by Jimmy Carter. Given away. And now China has leased both ends of the canal. They have military down there. There has been reported missiles that could reach 900 to 1,300 mile range hit the west coast of America. They stated 2 years ago the number one enemy of China was the United States. Are they encircling America? No, they have us encircled. It's a finished job. And so America is in trouble. When this happens, they said, we shall not have to attack. That is, if America will fold. If we will do what George W. Bush wants us to and merge into a regional government, as the masters of wisdom said had to be accomplished. If we will fold our hands and put up no resistance, there will not have to be a war. And because we've been so infiltrated by 33rd degree Masons who are hand selected to understand the program for world government, skull and bone members, and so on, they say that America might fall, just like Nikita Khrushchev put out a book one time. It had his picture on the front and his fist clenched, and he said, we will conquer without war. Is it going to happen? Will there be a fall of the United States without a war, or will there be a war, like it said in Ezekiel 38? In Orlando, Florida, in the week of October 16th, 2007, there was a Citgo gasoline station. The price of their gasoline for regular unleaded was $2.82 a gallon. There were no cars there. People in America are finding out that Citgo is controlled by Chavez and Venezuela. Across the street, however, was a gasoline station, and the gasoline was $2.85 per gallon, 3 cents more. It was flourishing with business, lines. They were waiting but wouldn't go to the Citgo because it was controlled by none other than Chavez. Why hasn't Americans done that to Walmart and Communist China? We're building their military. Every time somebody buys Citgo gasoline, it's building the military for Venezuela and Chavez. And he's spreading it around to the other countries in Central and South America. In the last 7 or 8 months, it takes someone who would pay attention to these kind of things, but you had to know that Citgo was owned practically 100% by Venezuela, that their signs have been changing. Citgo signs are coming down. There is another sign going up called Petro Express. It's to fool the American people so that we will continue to buy Chavez gasoline. Chavez is now getting a Russian weapon factory built by none other than George W. Bush's, President of the United States, personal friend Vladimir Putin. The Russians are building AK-47 assault rifles, an entire factory, so that they can supply through Venezuela every socialist communist country in South and Central America weapons. They want every rebel group throughout the Americas to be fully armed in case America does not fold peacefully. Chavez now has Iranians operating the oil fields in Venezuela. You wonder why people keep making little tiny statements here and there, and when you add them all up, you know that the plan has already been laid to invade Iran by the United States military before George Bush leaves office. It's inevitable, according to the statements they're making. It's only a matter of time before Chavez has Iranian-built long-range missiles stockpiled in his country. They will have a variety of warhead types aimed at guess who? The United States of America. There's a newspaper article that I have here, and one of those Democrats who are running for the presidency of the United States, Kucinich, questioned George Bush's sanity. He simply said that because Mr. George Bush said that a nuclear Iran will precipitate World War III, that he is willing to question his sanity. But with what is going on in the world today, and we know Bible prophecy calls our attention to the Middle East, but on the other hand, Bible prophecy, most of it, when it talks about Israel, is talking about the house of Israel. So there's a two-front prong in the world today, the Middle East and what all the communists have been saying, we will take America. We will take it without force. And if they won't give in, collapse willingly, we have a plan. We will come onto the mountains of Israel with our warplanes, and they have been testing them once again, coming down between Britain and the United States. Long-range bomber flights in the last 4 months, while China has been building their military as fast as they possibly can. But does George Bush, and believe me, he's only on the scene because God allowed him to be there. He has no choice in the matter. If he's fulfilling Bible prophecy, go, George, go. We're not for what's happening because we love America. We love it because we know we are a part of the lost 10 tribes of Israel. But when Israel has lost its way, then there are problems that are going to be resulting. Mr. George Bush, according to an intelligence report that I have here, this was in the Parade Magazine section of the Dallas Morning News, October 7th, 2007. talks about some of the people that he has placed in government. And here, to my surprise, was a picture of a skull and bones with a number 322 under it. Right there, simple as it can be. And it goes on to say that UN Ambassador to Australia, Robert McCallum, is a member of Bush's Skull and Bones at Yale. These are the people that he's been placing in offices around the world. What are they doing? They're working for world government. Then it also mentions United States Ambassador to Poland, Victor Ashe, was a close friend of George Bush at Yale and also a member of Skull and Bones. And then it goes on one step further and it talks about U.S. Ambassador to Sweden, Michael Wood, was Bush's friend in prep school, and he went on and was in the same fraternity at Yale. These are the type people that President Bush is putting into office. Is he accelerating the demise of America? Because they're all working for the same thing. Remember, international communism was founded by the Illuminati, who are the international bankers who had the money to support every revolutionary movement around the world. And now the United States is sending Skull and Bone members, who is the same society as Hitler's society, the Thule Society. And they are the ones that are preparing the way for nation after nation to collapse, to fall, to come into the world government. But in very fine print in the Defense Bill of 2006 that was presented was a section put in by John W. Warner Defense Authorization Act. In that it said that the President of the United States, according to this now known as Public Law 109-364, the President of the United States can reconstruct the meaning of the Posse Comitatus Act. The Posse Comitatus Act forbid the military forever policing the streets of America. But under this new verbiage that has been placed and sneaked into the bill, and nobody but one Democratic senator caught it, but it was too late. And so it's become law. It's in the books. They've rearranged the terminology so that they can arrest American citizens under the guise of terrorism. Not only can they arrest them, and they don't even have to report they've been arrested, where they are, but in this bill, they can use the same type of tactics that they've been having to send terrorists overseas to torture them, to try to extract information from them. There it is, right there. And so America has gone a long way down the tubes, preparing for the New World Order and the one world government. President Bush and Vladimir Putin met over in Europe. Actually, not Europe, it was in Hanoi. Remember Hanoi Jane? How she sat on a tank with a communist helmet, was against the war and so on. Well, now here's President Bush, Hanoi Bush, over there, and he's invited Russia to come into the World Trade Organization. Then also there's a Mr. Soros. He is a billionaire financier. And as a billionaire, he has a lot of weight to throw around because he has money. He said the European Union should be the same style of government that is employed in the North American community. He said that they should not rush to take national sovereignty away because it will threaten the people and scare them and they'll back out. But he said that they should have an end run, a piecemeal implementing of this government, so that the American people will not even understand what's happening to them, that their freedoms are being lost until it's too late. Did you realize that by the war's budget that has been handed in and approved, that it cost every man, woman, and child in America $800 apiece? That's $800 apiece to fight a war. That's just one time the budget. And when you add that up to over 300 million people, multiply it times 800, you get a lot of money. You know how everybody in America could be rich? If they'd stop the war and give $1 million of that to each person in the country. Then nobody would have to be hungry. Nobody would have to be in the ghettos up in Chicago and rats crawl up through the toilets at night and chew on the little children's toes and fingers. This happens. But there are different priorities. Not the good of the people, but the good of world government. Did you also realize that now NAFTA's superhighway has been approved? NAFTA's superhighway is going to be 10 lanes coming right up Interstate 35 out of Laredo, Texas, right up to Kansas City, where there's going to be a drop-off point. Then it's going to go all the way to the Canadian border. But the American people are asleep as to what's happening. The Chinese communists will avoid labor unions on the West Coast to unload their ships. They will be unloaded in Mexico, put into trucks, and they'll have a fast track and they'll come right across the border. Nothing or no one to look inside those trucks. America is on the verge. We can't set dates, but we know that we're deep into Bible prophecy. Jesus Christ has not changed his methods of dealing with people, dealing with nations. And in Hebrews 13, verse 8, it says, Jesus Christ the same yesterday, today, and forever. Now, his law does not change. None of his laws. Neither does the way he deals with nations. When a nation has been undermined, when it has turned its back upon him, he allows problems to occur. In Romans chapter 15, verse 4, it states very clearly that the things written in olden times, the Old Testament of the Bible, how God dealt with Israel and other nations, was to be a learning tool for us. But then in verse 8, it says this, Now I say that Jesus Christ was a minister of the circumcision for the truth of God, to confirm the promises made unto the fathers. Jesus Christ came to this earth, died so that he could redeem first Israel, then the rest of the world. But he hasn't changed his tactics, and until that redemption process takes place, if the nation turns its back upon its Creator God, the one that made a covenant with them, and it was to last to all generations. And in the book of Psalms, it says 1,000 generations, and we certainly haven't had that. And so that covenant is still in force today. Notice what happened in ancient times, though. You know, if you were to go out on the street corner and say the things that I've been saying today about the United States of America, that we needed to turn back to the living God, that somebody would call on their cell phone, first of all, and they would call the nearest funny farm. You would be gone. But in Daniel chapter 9, verse 3 to 6, look what it says. And I, this is Daniel, set my face unto the Lord God to seek by prayer and supplication with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. And I prayed unto the Lord my God and made my confession and said, O Lord, the great and dreadful God, keeping the covenant and mercy to them that love him and to them that keep his commandments. Now that's you and me. That's others like us around the country. Notice what he says now. He's talking about the nation that went into captivity, and he went with them. We have sinned and have committed iniquity and have done wickedly and have rebelled, even by departing from your precepts and from your judgments. That's how we rebel, and that's how we depart from God. Neither have we hearkened, or let's bring it to the modern day, listened unto your servants the prophets. No, Judah didn't listen. God sent them. They rose up early. They went out and preached, and the people wouldn't listen. In Israel, the northern 10 tribes, before they were taken into national captivity, he sent prophets. They killed them. They stoned them. They wouldn't listen. They wouldn't turn. They didn't want to hear that they were wrong. I mean, let them sit back and watch their big 64-inch TV and all the pornography coming on it and all the sick movies portraying sin after sin after sin till it becomes a part of their character. Don't bother them. Which sake in your name to our kings. So these prophets went in the name of God to the kings, to their fathers, to all the people of the land. They went. They gave the message they were supposed to deliver. Look at verse 9 and 10. To the Lord our God belongs mercies and forgivenesses, though we have rebelled against him. And that's America today. Neither have we obeyed the voice of the Lord our God to walk in his laws, which he set before us by his servants the prophets. God has always sent people to tell the nation to turn, come back to him. They haven't listened. They won't listen. And so things happen when you don't listen to God. Hosea. Now, this particular book of Hosea was written strictly to the house of Israel. Notice chapter 6, verse 4 to 7. O Ephraim, what shall I do unto you? O Judah, what shall I do unto you? So Ephraim headed up the lost 10 tribes. Judah headed up Judah and Benjamin. What shall I do unto you? For your goodness is as a morning cloud, and as the early dew it goes away. In other words, the truth they had, they let it go. They let it slip between the cracks. Therefore have I hewed or cut down them by the prophets. I sent prophets to tell you to turn. I have slain them by the words of my mouth. And your judgments are as the light that goes forth. Yes, God said, I've sent prophets. You haven't listened. So I'm going to slay all the leaders. Maybe not to death, but in captivity. For I desired mercy and not sacrifice, and the knowledge of God more than burnt offerings. But they, like men, have transgressed the covenant. These have they dealt treacherously against me. There have they dealt treacherously against me. The word in verse 7, men, but they like men, is number 120 in the Hebrew section of the Strong's Concordance. It's Adam. Like Adam, Israel has also rebelled against God, against the covenant. Well, what's God going to do about it? He said, I've noticed, I've seen it. Hosea 1, verse 9 to 11. God showed that 2 children would be born. One of them would have a name that meant, you are not my people. Then a second one would be born, which meant, you are my people. The first one, you're not my people, meant because they were sinners. They transgressed the covenant. God gave them up. But when Christ returns, he'll regather them. Then they will be his people and he will be their God. So verse 9 to 11. Then said God, call his name Lo-Ammi, for you are not my people and I will not be your God. That's what he's saying to Israel today. Prophecy many times is dual. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. It shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, you are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, you are the sons of the living God. Why? Because Jesus is going to intervene in world affairs and regather Israel. But today, right now, he has turned his back upon this nation because it has violated his covenant to no end. And out of this nation, he has selected a group of people that dare to obey him. Those are the ones that he's given scriptures in the Bible of hope, of protection from the things that are coming. Verse 11, then shall the children of Judah and the children of Israel be gathered together and appoint themselves one head. We know that's David according to Ezekiel chapter 37. And they shall come up out of the land. Yes, they will be regathered. God said other things in the book of Hosea, though. Chapter 4, verse 1 through 7. Hear the word of the Lord, you children of Israel, for the Lord has a controversy with the inhabitants of the land. Because there is no truth. Can you listen to a speech by a politician and discern any truth in it? Nor mercy, nor knowledge of God in the land. Yes, people have a zeal for God, but not according to knowledge. They don't even know that he has a covenant. They say everything in the Old Testament was done away. It was nailed to the cross. No, Jesus was nailed to the cross because we violated the covenant. And he had to die to forgive us for violating it. And Hebrews 9, 14 and 15 says that is exactly what happened. We are responsible for the laws of the first covenant. The second just gives better promises for obedience to that covenant. Verse 2, by swearing and lying and killing and stealing and committing adultery, they break out and blood touches blood. Does that sound like America? Does that sound like the drug dealers? Does that sound like betting and all these casinos and everything else? People trying to steal other people's property, automobiles, whatever that belongs to them. Lying politicians, people lying to cover up their own sins. Therefore shall the land mourn, and everyone that dwells therein shall languish. Drop down to verse 4. Yet let no man strive, nor reprove another. Hey, don't even try to correct them. They're uncorrectable. Every man is doing that which is right in their own eyes. For your people are as they that strive with a priest. They'll stand there and argue with a priest or with a minister. I didn't do that. I'm a perfect husband. I don't throw my underwear on the floor just so my wife will have to pick them up. Don't you accuse me of that. Oh, it's hilarious, but that's the way we are. Verse 5, therefore shall you fall in the day, and the prophet also shall fall with you in the night, and I will destroy your mother. God said the prophets of the nation, or the ministers of the nation that are not teaching his correct ways are going to fall with the rest of the people. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge because they're not being told the truth. Because you have rejected knowledge, I will also reject you, that you shall be no priest to me, seeing that you have forgotten the law of your God. And what does every minister say? Every one of them that I grew up hearing said the law was nailed to the cross. It's done away. We don't have to keep that old law. That's what they said to me when I sat down with them and said, I believe the Sabbath day is correct. It's the fourth commandment in the Bible. No, that was done away. Jesus was resurrected Sunday morning. He changed it. No, he didn't. He was resurrected Saturday night, right before sunset. There goes your theory down the tubes. And they argue and argue and argue. So I got up and left. Never looked back. And I've been on God's side ever since. And hopefully he's been on my side. And I'm looking at another group of people that's been on God's side ever since. But he says, because you have forgotten the law of your God, I will also forget your children. Is there coming a new world order? Are the children of this country that have been undermined by the American Civil Liberties Union, will they not have any inkling of what's happening to them because they don't even know the true God? Look at Amos chapter 2, verse 11 to 16. And I raised up of your sons for prophets, and of your young men for Nazarites. In other words, they would take a vow. They would have no alcohol to ever enter their lips. It is not even thus. Is it not even thus, O you children of Israel? But you gave the Nazarites wine to drink. You tempted them. They gave in and commanded the prophets, saying, hey, don't you prophesy. Don't you tell me this country's going to collapse. Don't you tell me we're going into national captivity. Don't you dare. Behold, I'm pressed under you, as a cart is pressed that is full of shelves or sheaves. Therefore the flight shall perish from the swift, and the strong shall not strengthen his force. Neither shall the mighty deliver himself. No national captivity is coming. He won't intervene, not until Jesus comes to deliver us out of captivity. Neither shall he stand that handles the bow. The military is going to just stand there helpless. And he that is swift of foot shall not deliver himself. There's an old saying, you can run but you can't hide. And that's what it's talking about here. It doesn't matter. You may have the fastest car in town, but when they've got surveillance and they've got the rockets, they'll blow you off the highway if they choose to. Neither shall he that rides the horse deliver himself. You can have a fast getaway, but they'll get to you quickly enough. And he that is courageous among the mighty shall flee away naked in that day. God said, I'm just going to take all of your strength from you because you have turned your back upon me as a nation. Not his church. Not his church. We're talking about America that we love. Can it survive? Not a chance. Captivity's coming. He's going to bring Israel out of captivity. In 1 Kings chapter 18. 1 Kings chapter 18. Verse 13. This is talking about Elijah. Was it not told my Lord what I did when Jezebel slew the prophets of the Lord? How I hid 100 men of the Lord's prophets by 50 in a cave and fed them with bread and water. God can hide. You know, Jezebel hated Elijah because he exposed her sins. Do you know what is going to happen in the United States of America today to anyone who exposes the sins of this nation, and especially the leadership? They may not kill them. They may not stand up and shoot them in a firing squad, but they will use their mass media to discredit, to make that person seem like he's telling lies by just taking one little word or two or three little words out of context and put in their own verbiage and explain what was just said instead of the truth. Oh, they have their ways. They're going to have some way in which there's coming a famine of the hearing of the word. It'll be in our day. Look what it says in Matthew 5, verse 12. This is Jesus talking. Remember, he was the God of the Old Testament. Rejoice and be exceeding glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so persecuted they the prophets which were before you. In ancient Israel, they persecuted all the prophets. In Judah, they persecuted the prophets. They killed them. They don't want to hear that they have to change. They don't want to hear that there is something wrong with their agenda. And so it's not going to be any different today. When the right time comes and God says, time's up. In Matthew 23, verse 34, Jesus talking to those scribes, Pharisees of that day, wherefore, behold, I send unto you prophets. This is what he did. And wise men and scribes. And some of them you shall kill and crucify. And some of them shall you scourge in the synagogues and persecute them from city to city. Well, what does it say in Revelation 11? There's going to be two witnesses that God's going to put his power upon that's going to witness against this end-time system that's coming. They will be persecuted. They'll be hounded. They'll be ridiculed. And finally, when God says, I'll take my protection away, they're going to be killed. That's because of a God-defying world. My last scripture today, there is coming world government. It's coming. None of us know exactly the moment in time that it'll arrive, but Jesus Christ does. In 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 13 to 16. Yet the Lord testified against Israel and against Judah by all the prophets and by all the seers, that's the holy men, saying, turn you from your evil ways and keep my commandments and my statutes, according to all the law which I commanded your fathers, and which I sent to you by my servants, the prophets. God has sent people in every generation to his people, physical people. Notwithstanding, they would not hear, but hardened their necks, like to the neck of their fathers, that did not believe in the Lord their God. Why did it say they did not believe? Because they did not keep the commandments, the statutes, and the judgments. Belief is an active word. If you believe, you obey. If you disbelieve, you won't obey. And you can tell by the life someone lives whether they believe or don't believe. Verse 15, and they rejected his statutes and his covenant that he made with their fathers, and his testimonies which he testified against them. And they followed vanity, worthlessness, and became vain, and went after the heathen that were round about them. And what's happening in America today? People are accepting Buddhism, Eastern Oriental religions, atheism, any ism there is, but not the covenant of God, concerning whom the Lord had charged them that they should not do like them. And they left all the commandments of the Lord their God. Brethren, are you and I going to leave the commandments of the Lord our God? Will pressure come upon us here at the close of the age? Or will we have the capacity, because God's Holy Spirit is inside of us, and he said that he would never leave nor forsake us, and because he said that every time there is a burden that seems greater than we can bear, if we will look, he will provide a way out for us. Do we believe that right now in our personal lives? Do we believe that Jesus is going to punish this nation because they have turned their back upon the covenant? But on the other hand, do we believe that he can protect us because we have not turned our back? He has specifically chosen us. God loves you, and I want to encourage you, every one of you. Don't let anything turn your head away from his covenant. Live by his laws, his statutes, with a pure and genuine heart. And when we see all these things happening around us, we can know for a surety that God is on our side.